baby.
Good evening and welcome to the last class of 2021 from Community Homeworks. For almost a year, we have been virtual and hope you have enjoyed our classes and know that you can always go back and watch anything we've done in the past. Go to our Facebook page or YouTube and just put in our name and everything will pop up and you can choose what you'd like to rewatch. Tonight our class is furnace troubleshooting. Lee is here to remind us all the things we can check on our own instead of calling a service person at this time of year. Hopefully it will get your heat back up and running quicker and less expensive than having to call a repair person. We would also, of course, like to remind you as you're doing your giving at this time of year that we are a nonprofit organization and appreciate any kind of donation that you could possibly make to us. That information, how to do that, will be scrolling across the bottom of the screen, and you can take care of it that way. The other thing that will be scrolling across the screen is how to contact us if you have any questions. In the future, you can email them to us and someone will get back to you. At any time during the broadcast tonight, you can type your questions in the comment section. We can see them and we will ask Lee to try to answer them. So sit back, relax, enjoy your warm home, and learn how to keep it that way. Lee, where would you like to start?
All right. Yeah, so this is, you said heating systems. Like Gene said, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in. If you're watching live, we'll try to be able to answer them. This class is really just the basic functions of most furnaces. There are a couple of different styles of furnace out there, but we'll go through those. But this is mainly just so you have a decent understanding of the things that you can do to be able to make your furnace, operate properly, and things that you can do can make it so that you don't unintentionally shorten its life. So we'll start out with like I said, there's a couple of different style furnaces. So I'm going to start out with that. Around where we are here, most of our furnaces are a forced air furnace that's run off of natural gas. That's what this guy is right here. There's also electric style furnaces, and there are what are called heat pumps. We'll touch on those. And there are also boilers, and there's a style called, that runs off of oil heat. That's not quite as common where we are, but like I said, there are a couple of different styles. As far as the furnaces themselves, if you're kind of curious on, how old is my furnace, how efficient is it, that sort of thing. I'm going to say probably for forced air, I'm going to pick on forced air because, again, that's the most common for us where we live. The easiest way to know kind of rough efficiency of how effective your furnace is as far as turning that natural gas into actual usable heat is by looking at the furnace itself. So you have, with a higher efficiency furnace, one of these is exhaust, we'll get into that, and one of these is fresh air intake. All right. If it's plastic or that PVC, something along that line, that usually means it's a little higher efficiency furnace. Compared to when we don't have one here, but instead of these plastic pipes coming out, if you have like a metal 4-inch pipe coming right out of the middle right here, and it's going up, and it might go over to like a chimney or something and stuck in there, that is usually like an 80% or less efficient. These usually hang around the 90 to 95 to 97% efficiency. And basically what that means is that, more of that natural gas that you're using and that you're paying for is actually being turned into usable heat and not necessarily being shot up the flue, and up and out. So that's a relatively easy way to be able to to be able to give a feel for how efficient of a furnace you may have. Now, like I said, this class is busted up into a lot of other classes. This is actually these are the classes that it got busted up into. So if you have air conditioning, like I said, this is the heating systems. If you have air conditioning and ventilation, that's actually a separate class. Home safety and security is tied into this. Weatherization is tied into this. So there's quite a bit. So we just made this class on its own. So first off, I want to go through some of the basics on the furnace. Again, sorry if it's too basic, but we have to start from the very beginning. So you have what's called a return air. So what this does is it's collecting air from around your home. Sometimes those register or the vents might be in the floor, they might be down low, they might be up high. If your furnace is running, you should be able to feel that air being sucked into that vent. And the vents could be all different sizes. But that air is collected throughout your house, and it's ducted into this ductwork, and that air is running down this way. So it runs through, then it's going to run through, turn and run through your air filter. It's going to go into a blower motor. We'll pull all this apart and show it all. Into a blower motor, which is actually the thing that's moving that air. That air is moved up through what's called a heat exchanger. It's heated up, and it goes into a second set of ductwork, which is connected usually, to, if you have a basement, some kind of trunk line. And most often you have like 6-inch pipes that are going off to the different bedrooms and whatnot. That's the basic gist of how that works. There's a lot more to it, of course. But so that airflow, in through the return, through the filter, up through your furnace, distributed to other rooms via usually 6-inch lines, metal lines that are shot out to every other, all the other rooms. You have your thermostat. This is what actually controls the furnace. So in this case, this has central air, so it has a cool function, an off, and heat. Right now it's on heat. And the fan, that's basically that blower motor. We'll get into that. Auto means that when the furnace kicks on, the fan is going to run and move that air around. On, it depends on how it's wired in your furnace. Sometimes you just want to be able to move that air throughout your house, and your furnace may not be operating necessarily at that time. Shoulder seasons are a good sign, time to be able to use that. So spring or fall, when it's not really cold enough, your basement may be cold, or you may have a room that's a little cold, you just want to kind of move that air around. That's what that on feature for the fan is good for. Thermostat itself, pick on this again. A lot of different styles of thermostats out there. You have, walk over here, show these. You have so you have different styles. You have the good old round, which a lot of people have. These are just usually just strictly heat. You have different styles. Like I said, some are programmable, meaning you can set programs on them to be able to, drop down when you're at work or whatever. And then there are other styles that are not necessarily programmable. And this is something that, if you want a programmable thermostat, that is one of those things that you're going to want to be able to have a heating tech come out and be able to do. It is possible for someone to be able to do it. It just can get a little bit confusing with all the wires, and I'll show you what I'm talking about a little bit later. I do want to say a couple things about thermostats. If you have a style like this, and you really want to have it changed out, or let's say you're going to change it out and you know how to do that, great. Or you hire somebody to do it, don't throw this out. The reason is that if you look at this, there is a mercury switch in here. It's a little glass vial filled with mercury, and that's the last thing you want to throw into the garbage. So hazardous waste in most places will take these. They don't necessarily want you cutting out those little glass vials, but you can take it down to a hazardous waste and they'll be able to dispose of it properly. So that's the thing with this style in particular you want to think about. The other is that, now they have thermostats that you can get on your phone and, be able to do whatever from wherever you're at. They do need Wi-Fi to be able to work, that sort of thing. And they're nice. The thing you got to watch out for, if you are having somebody install a thermostat for you, no matter really what type it is, a lot of them have batteries. And, they may have batteries in them. This is mounted to the wall, right? There's your batteries. A lot of times the batteries are there to hold the program, and that's fine. The issue I have is that there are thermostats out there where if your battery dies, your whole furnace doesn't work. And that is the last thing you want in the middle of the winter. And why they design them that way, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. But they are out there. So, you can ask that simple question, as far as, hey, if my batteries die, am I not going to have heat, or my pipe's going to freeze, all that sort of stuff. So if you are having that changed around, that might be something you want to know, because it's rough to learn that the hard way.
The other thing you want to ask is, do you want a 7-day programmable or a 5 and 2? So that means a 5 and 2 Monday through Friday will be the same, and then you can program the weekend the same. And if your schedule is crazy, you probably want a 7-day programmable thermostat, so that you can make each day individual. If you have a smart thermostat, you can program it from your phone. So I just turned my heat down because I'm not home. Well, as soon as I touch the right button, you can turn it back up. So I can slide it up as warm as I want it to be, so that when I get home, my house will be toasty instead of cold. And it's fun. You can also do that right on the thermostat, but it's really nice.
Freeze out visitors at your house.
Yes, if somebody's there and I don't want them there, I can turn the heat way down and they get cold and they leave. But it's really nice because quite often I'm going out the door with 75 things in my hand and went, oh, the thermostat. Oh, I can do it in my car on my phone. So I've enjoyed mine, but I did have it professionally installed, because there are things that you have to wire in your furnace to make it work. It's not just a case of take off the old thermostat from the wall and put on a new one. So have it professionally done. An electrician, an HVAC person, either of those people can do it for you. But I've had mine for, 4 or 5 years now and love it. Quite often Consumers Energy offers really good deals on them. Sometimes they're last year's model. Who cares? It's going to be last year's model by next year. So, but they'll be, sometimes they're even free. So check with Consumers Energy, ask them if they've got a deal on a Nest or an Ecobee or Ecobee thermostat.
All right. The other thing about thermostats, Gene took what I was going to say, so whatever. The other thing about thermostats is what a lot of people will do is, they're going to the house and they think it's cold, so they turn the thermostat way up, thinking that it's going to heat up their house faster. Nope, it won't. It will heat it up the same rate. It doesn't matter, So
you put it at 60 or you put it at 95.
Right.
It's still going to heat up.
Take the same amount of time. So, because I've seen people do that where they ramp their thermostat up as high as it'll go, and all of a sudden they're opening windows and stuff because it's too hot in the house. So it's just wasting money. So when you turn your thermostat up, set it to where you want it, and you're good. So that's probably a nice, easy way to think about that. Same goes for cooling too. We'll talk about So I want to go through kind of the normal steps of a thermostat. All right. So with your thermostat, what it does is I'm turning the temperature down, and this is showing what I'm turning that temperature down to. I'm gonna say down to 60, and hear that there was a click there. So that thermostat is telling the furnace, yep, we need heat or we don't need heat. I'm gonna turn you on, turn you off, whatever. So generally, if you have an issue with that furnace not working, the first thing you go to is the thermostat. And it sounds really simple, but you know, again, I've seen it where somebody was messing with the thermostat and turned that little thing to the off position. And somebody goes, oh, my furnace isn't working. And they, you know, they don't understand the basic steps to go through, and they call somebody out. Now, this is usually on a weekend or, you know, early in the morning or late at night or something along that line. And you get an emergency call, and that person comes out, and they're charging you an arm and a leg, and they walk up to the thermostat, and they go, well, it's good. Pay me my money. And it really stinks to have that happen, but it happens. So, you know, what you want to do is you want to make sure, A, you're on heat. It sounds basic, but yes, you want to make sure you're on heat. The fan setting is not that big a deal, whether it's on or auto. Then what you want to do is the temperature it's showing now. They're a little different sometimes. Thermostats, you know, this is showing the temperature it is. If you bump it up, this is showing what you want the temperature at. And again, you know, I've seen it where somebody has their temperature bumped down to 60 degrees and it's 65. Well, yeah, your furnace is not going to kick on because it's satisfied that thermostat as far as how hot or how warm you want it in the house. So you make sure you're on heat. You make sure that you've turned your temperature above whatever temperature it is in the house. It can be a couple of different, you know, a couple of degrees or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Then what you want to do is you should be able to come down and you know, see if your furnace is operating. A couple of things at that point, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're getting power. You have to shut down. So one of the things with some of these furnaces, and sometimes there's a little sight window down here. But see this one here has a light on it? That's showing me it's getting power. That power is coming to that furnace. Sometimes you're not getting power. And as silly as it sounds, some of the new furnaces, this is mounted here, but sometimes there's a switch mounted on the side. It may look like a light switch. It may look like something else. But I want to show you what happens to that light when I turn this off. See that light turns off? And now that light's on. So as goofy as it sounds, you know, you want to make sure you have power going to that furnace. And whether it's a switch on the side, it looks like a light switch, or it might be mounted on the wall. It might even be what's called a fuse switch. Be right back. You may have something with what's called a fuse switch on the side, and it's just a light switch. And it may be mounted on the side over here, something along that line. Power goes through a fuse and then to your switch. And again, people get in there, kids, whatever, they'll be playing around with it and they'll flick it off, and then you don't have any power going to the unit, and of course it's not going to work at that point. So you want to make sure you have power going to it. If you have a fuse switch like this, let's say, you know, I usually will write on there, on or off, because it's really hard to see these sometimes and get confusing sometimes. So, you know, magic or permanent marker right on there, what's on, what's off. So I make sure that's on. If I'm still not getting power, usually I'll keep one of these style fuses. If you have a fuse switch like this, you know, when it's warm outside, take that in and see this is a 15 amp TL fuse. I'm going to leave one right here just in case that one burns out for some reason. So if that's the case, you switch power off, put your new fuse in, turn it back on, see what you got. All right.
You don't want it to be midnight and you don't have any fuses. And
Right.
there's no
Yeah.
store
So I
to
mean,
get
you know, certain
them.
things you leave in your junk drawer, you can set them on top or whatever, you know. So if you have one of those, it's nice to have one of those as a backup because again, it's Murphy's Law. It's always going to happen in the middle of the freaking night or on Christmas or whatever. So let's go through a scenario of we don't have heat. So I'm going to go to the thermostat. I'm going to say, all right, is my thermostat on heat? Yep, it is. Am I calling for heat? Meaning that I've turned that temperature up higher than the temperature is in the house. I'll say, all right, I'm at 72. It's definitely warmer than I want it. Do I have power? I'm going to look for that light or look through the hole, and see if I have power. Is the furnace actually doing anything? If I have a switch, I'm going to look for a switch. So I turn on that switch, and the furnace is going to go through a couple of little cycles. I want to talk about those. So what's usually is going to happen, especially with this style where we have a higher efficiency furnace, you're going to have on the inside, you're going to have a motor, this motor right here. What this motor is doing is pulling out gases out of the heat exchanger, and it's expelling them out this way, right? Then what happens is that it's going to have a glow stick or something along that line. You'll hear that click. Gas is run through, right? Fire's on. There's a little probe, and it's hard to see, but there's a little probe back in there. It's basically a flame sensor. And sometimes it's a combination flame sensor and igniter. But what that flame sensor is doing is just saying, yep, we got flame, I can keep running, because if for some reason you don't have flame, you just don't want gas spewing out. So it's heating up the heat exchanger. This is still running because this is what's pulling out that carbon monoxide out of your house. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have a big blower motor down here. And once this heat exchanger gets up to a certain temperature, it's going to kick on the big blower here, which is going to blow that air past that heat exchanger, stripping off that heat and distributing it through your house. Like I said, it has to go through certain steps. So it's going to have certain noises and clicks and whatnot. Some of the really nice furnaces are hard to even hear that big blower motor going. And I'll show you over here with this guy. So, like I said, there's a certain order of things that it's going to be able to go through. And like I said, so sometimes, especially with the higher efficiency ones, they are, in a sense, they have a lot of safeties built into them. There's a lot going on in here. And what will happen sometimes is you can have a variety of reasons why your furnace won't start. But what will happen is that furnace is going to try, usually about 3 times. It's going to go through its startup cycle. And if something goes wrong, it's going to shut everything down, wait for a second, and then it's going to try again. And then we'll shut things down, wait for a second, and we'll try again. We'll shut things down, and then usually stop. Because it just doesn't want to wear itself out by constantly trying. That being said, sometimes all these really need is to kill the power to it. So that switch either on the side or on the wall. Sometimes you shut it off, usually count to 5, turn it back on. Sometimes that's all it needs to be able to kick on. Now, if you're constantly doing that, there's something wrong. But in a pinch, that's usually the easiest way to be able to try it. Because a lot of times, too, if you call somebody and talk to them, they're going to say that, have you tried restarting your furnace or rebooting your furnace? Sometimes they call it that. But, so shut that power off, wait for 5 seconds, turn that power back on, and then listen for those cycles. And a lot of times you could look in and be able to see this. Normally this cover is on. Sometimes there's a sight glass in here, so you don't have to pull this cover off. So,
my furnace is only 4 years old, but sometimes it'll cut off and cut right back on. Do I need to get it checked?
Yeah, if your furnace is doing something like that, yeah. And we're going to talk about having somebody come out and be able to do those maintenance checks on them. like I said, with especially with the newer furnaces, there are so many safeties built in that it's really difficult, I guess, to have a furnace fail in a sense where it's going to like blow something up or something along that line. So they said there are a lot of sensors and whatnot, and sometimes it just something will get too hot or whatever. But if it's shutting down continuously and you're having to restart it, it's saying there's usually a problem. On that note, you should really what you should do is you should have your furnace checked once a year or once every couple of years. And you can talk to the furnace person that you have. They're usually going to be able to, if they're honest with you, they're going to be able to say, your furnace, you're good with, having it checked once every other year. Or they might say you really should have it checked once a year. I'm going to leave that one alone, but you really should have it checked in, because the thing is that, even if your furnace is relatively new, there can be issues with it, like a cracked heat exchanger or something along that line. It's actually, spewing carbon monoxide in, and it's under warranty. There may be parts in here that are under warranty for a certain amount of time, and there may be other parts in here that are under warranty for a longer amount of time. I've seen it where, a brand new furnace gets a crack in its heat exchanger in the first 2 years. And at that point, that a lot of that is covered. Now, usually labor is not necessarily covered, but this is something that if you're having a new furnace put in, you want to ask those questions and stuff like that. And also have, your owner's manual and understand that sort of thing. And that's really where you want to make sure that whoever is doing that work is a licensed, certified person. You said the stuff I'm talking about that, a typical homeowner can do, we're not getting into changing pieces and parts and ripping things out. So you're asking for trouble half the time when you're doing that, especially if you're not fully sure on what's going on. So you should have that checked out. So I'm going to go through these again real quick. I'm going to hold this. This is a blower motor down here. There's a big motor right here. This is the motherboard. So this is, in a sense, it's a computer. These are your thermostat wires. And, because this one has air conditioning, there's quite a few wires in there. And again, it's usually how it's hooked up here as far as whether that fan runs on auto or a continuous run. There is one little thing I want to point out, and most of these have it. And I just have to find it. Some do, some don't. This one may not. Sometimes, that's right here. See this? This little fuse right here? I'm gonna pull this out. This just looks like a standard car fuse. It's a little 3-amp fuse. But what this does is it protects. This is a motherboard here. It's really expensive. So let's say you get a power surge or something along that line. And, you get a power surge that's running through. It's going to fry that fuse out before, hopefully, it fries the motherboard. So along that line of little things that you should have in your junk drawer is open this bottom, turn the power off, open this bottom up, make sure it's not running. Don't stick your fingers in there. But what you're looking for is a little fuse like that. And if you have one like that, have it in your junk drawer again. Nice to have, because that's something relatively easy that you can do. I would say the biggest thing is make sure you touch something metal before you go reaching in there. You want to make sure the power's off, but you don't want a static charge frying that motherboard. So I touch something metal before I reach in and grab that. And you got to make sure that power's off. So there's usually some kind of a fuse that helps protect that motherboard. There's also a door switch here. So I'm going to hold that door switch. You hear that click. That light comes on. There's that light saying, yep, we're getting power. And that thermostat's turned up. I think that thermostat's turned up.
I think it's 67 in here, though. Hang on.
Bump that thermostat up a little bit.
Oh, yeah, I think it's 67. And
There you go. So I'm holding this. This is something you don't really want to do. There's that motor. That's running. This is your exhaust gas here, so it's basically pulling out that exhaust, spewing it to the outside. And you'll look inside here, and you'll see this little glow stick, a little glow that's going to be able to ignite that gas. It's coming through this. It'll glow. You'll hear a click. That's this. Go and fire up the gas. Eventually, gas will run for a little while. Your little sensor will say, "Yep, we got flame. We're good." It's going to heat up that heat exchanger, and then that big blower motor is going to kick on and be able to move that air. And it will run like that until the thermostat's satisfied with what temperature it's set at. I'm going to kill that right now. So those are your basics, right? With natural gas, with natural gas, this is the other thing. This is similar to what we talk about in plumbing class. You have a little turnoff right here. And me personally, I think these turnoffs should be put a little higher, but I've seen sometimes these turnoffs are real low. And they're usually yellow or red. But what you want to make sure is that it's in line versus like that. Because again, I've seen that where kids are downstairs playing around and they see that bright red thing and they turn it. And then your furnace runs through all your cycling. It just never fires up. And again, it really sucks to call somebody out and they walk up and they check your thermostat first. Yep. And they walk down to your furnace and they go, "Well, you're not getting gas." And they go, "Yep, now you're getting gas." And they fire up your furnace and it runs and everything's good. And they want you to pay them. So make sure your gas is turned on if you have natural gas forced air furnace. So they said there's usually a turnoff valve there. Like I said, the higher efficiency ones, this is, like I said, this is exhaust. So this is that carbon monoxide and whatnot. It is run. And this one goes up to the roof. A lot of times if it's in a basement, it's going out a rim joist or something along that line. And you can trace this out. Some people actually write on them and put exhaust. And then the other one is intake. So what this is doing is just pulling in fresh air from the outside, pulling it in for your combustion air, and then expelling the stale air. Now, sometimes what will happen, and this happened to me, is, these are sticking outside of your house. And there's a lot of different varieties of how they can stick out depending on when it was put in. But one time what happened is that I was doing my fall cleanup and I had something like a hammock or I can't remember what it was. And these two pipes are sticking out. And what I did was I leaned my thing, whatever it was, up against those pipes and I wasn't thinking about it. Well, what happens is that when that first motor is running right here, it's making sure that this is not blocked. And this can be blocked, anywhere down this line all the way to the outside. So what was happening is that it was getting enough back pressure when it was blowing on whatever I set in front of it, where the computer's saying, no, something's not right, and it would never turn on. And I was going through the steps, and that's one of the steps, is that you want to make sure that whatever your exhaust is, or even your intake, that it's not blocked by something, by snow, kids throwing, rocks in it, whatever, right? So, you want to make sure that those are clear. And that was the issue. But, again, I knew kind of the cycle that it was going through, and I was like, something's not right. And I walked outside, and yep, sure enough, I was like, well, it was my fault. Moved it, and it worked fine. So, understanding some of those basics, having some of the if you have a fuse like this, or you have a little fuse like that, having a few of those laying around. Very rarely does that actually go out, but again, fuses don't really go bad. So I do want to pick on this furnace. This is just a non-operable furnace, but it will be able to show you kind of what these heat exchangers look like and stuff. So this is a heat exchanger in a furnace. This is just, a lot of times it's just a pipe. It's bent and it runs, and that flame is heating this up. And again, that air is moving up past this and stripping off the heat off that heat exchanger.
some of the higher efficiency furnaces, if you look down, you might be able to see it. You look way down in there. See those fins?
I don't know if I can't see them on the phone, but
Turn your light on.
I don't know how to turn it on when I'm taping.
Oh, wait, I got a flashlight. Yeah. See those fins down there?
Yeah, now you can see them.
That is kind of like a secondary heat exchanger, right? So that's a lot of ways. A lot of times that's how they'll up the efficiency of it. It's like they almost have two heat exchangers in there. But anyways, that air is moving up past that point and heating everything up. And then, like I said, the blower motor and all that. This is the blower motor. This is what it looks like. Oh, it's not cut out.
That one is.
Yeah, that one here. That one is. So, a lot of times you have that motor in here. And this is what's called a squirrel cage.
Oh, you can see the fins there.
Yeah, you can see these fins. It's a little different style, but this is
Don't
what's
run your
mainly
hands
doing.
over those fins, 'cause
You'll
cut
slice
yourself
yourself.
up. Yeah. Do not touch the fins.
But like I said, this is kind of a cutout for you to be able to see that, right? And like I said, this one's here. The thing with these is that generally you're not going to want to get in here and really mess with anything necessarily. If you clean in here, that's all right. Probably the biggest thing I would say that a homeowner can do, they can either make their furnace work more efficiently or break their furnace, is their air filter or lack of. So I'm gonna go back over here. I'm gonna grab a few things. So a lot of different styles. Oh, sorry, bad day. A lot of different styles of air filters. So remember I was saying that air is being collected through the house, it's running down through. This is running through this style air filter. A lot of different ways to access it. So sometimes they drop in through the top, sometimes they slide in. Sometimes they're leaning, it just depends, So if you don't know what kind of air filter you have, go look and see. So whenever you go to change your air filter, you want to shut your furnace down. You do not want to pull that air filter out when it's running. It is one of the worst things you can do. So again, either turn your thermostat off or kill it on the switch. And you want that blower motor to stop running. The reason is that sometimes they're in there pretty tight. I've seen it where people have, pull that filter out and they rip pieces and chunks, right? And what will happen is you can kind of see the blower motor here. I'll put a light on it. See it better. So you can see that blower motor is right there. And what will happen is it sucks in pieces. I'll do this feature. It sucks in pieces. See the little red dot?
No, can't see it.
Yeah. It'll suck in pieces into that blower cage, that squirrel cage, and throw it off balance. And it will sit there and eventually tear that motor up. So, my thing is that if you pull that filter out and you notice that pieces of the filter are missing, I would say call somebody in and have them fish it out. I'm not going to say to stick your hand in there. That makes me nervous. But you want to make sure that you shut that thing down. And when you pull that filter out, you don't have any chunks or pieces missing. Now, the style of the furnace, lots of different styles out there. The 5-inch, you have 2-inch, you have 1-inch, and they talk about thickness, right? Then you have the styles that have the pleats. And generally you have, like I said, here's this style. It's a 1-inch. 1-inch thick, 20 by 25. That's this one. But generally, the pleats, the closer the pleats are together, the more material you have, the better it's going to filter that air. And you can look, and when you're looking at the air filters, there's all different types. Like I said, this is kind of a nice one. But again, that one's up to you as far as how much it actually filters that air. Usually the more items it's going to pull out, or the smaller the items that it will pull out, generally means that filter is going to clog up a little bit more. And this really boils down to I always say, you know, if you have 20 cats and, you know, a fuzzy sweater collection or something, you might have to change your filter off, you know, a little more than normal. But usually with like a 1-inch filter, they say about every 30 days of operation. And what I mean by that is that operation is saying that big blower fan is moving that air through that filter. Remember we were talking about if your thermostat's set up to where it might be spring or fall and you're not necessarily heating the air, but you just want it to move around. Well, that's counting as time because that air is moving through that filter. So, like I said, and some thermostats even have it where it will say, you know, hey, your blower motor's been running this long. It's about time to change the filter, that sort of thing. So like I said, usually the 1-inch ones are about 30 days of operation. Ones like this, you know, they can be anywhere from, you know, sometimes they're a year, sometimes they're a little less. And again, it just depends. So here's my thing. If you pull that filter out and it's looking like that, I mean, this is actually the side. This thing is not letting barely anything through it. I can hold it up to the light and barely be able to see that. It used to look like this, by the way. And you know, here I can see there's evidence that there are pieces and stuff, and I'm like, this is not good. What this is doing is that it is starving that motor. And what happens is that motor is going to keep working to pull that air through that filter, and it will burn itself out. And that is one of the things, I'd say one of the leading causes of, you know, self-destruction, if you want to call it that, of furnaces, is that they just don't change their filters. So, like I said, whatever style filter, you'll get the hang of it. You know, usually what I do when I pull that out, I'm going to hold it up to the light and, you know, be able to see, you know, how much light I can see through it. You can see with that one, I can hold it up and it's still pretty nice versus, you know, that one. So you can also allow them to have a spot where you can write the date when you put it on, that sort of thing. Some people write it right here, you know, permanent marker. They'll write that down. The other thing is this. There's a little arrow, and that's important. Why is that important? Well, I'm going to show you both sides. So this side is what goes on this side, on the return air side, versus this side. This side has kind of a metal mesh, and you're going to see that on most of the furnaces. I don't care if one looks like this. I don't care if it looks like this, right? And they're all going to have arrows. There's the arrow right there. There's that arrow right there. That arrow always points towards the furnace or in the direction of the airflow. That's another way you can do it. So what some people will do is they'll get a permanent marker and they'll say, oh, my airflow is running this way. And my airflow is running that way. Don't worry, it's permanent marker can be cleaned off with denatured alcohol or rubbing alcohol. So you'd always have that matched up with, that arrow matches up with that airflow. The other thing is that you want to make sure that the furnace is the correct size. So not only the thickness, but the correct size as far as depth and height. And again, I've seen it where somebody can't find the right size filter and they just jam something in there and there's a big gap like this on the back. Well, all that dirty air is flying by it and getting clogged up into that squirrel cage and making it so that that motor, that squirrel cage doesn't move as much air, which in turn heats up that heat exchanger, which in turn makes that heat exchanger conk out a little bit quicker or makes your furnace shut down because it's getting too hot. So like I said, a lot of things boil around your air filter. So correct size, making sure that gets changed out, and you know, making sure you're understanding kind of what you're looking at. So I said I get my new filter. Some people will at this point, while it's open, get a shot back or something like that and like clean out in there if they have access to it, fine. I always make sure my cat didn't go in there. I won't say why, but you know, again, sounds horrible, but I've heard those stories. You know, I make sure that my arrow is pointing towards the furnace. Put my filter in there. Make sure it's seated in there right. And go ahead and write my date when I installed it. This one was just installed recently. Make sure that's in. Give that a shut, and then go ahead and turn your furnace back on. So you should be able to run the way it needs to be able to run. If you have air conditioning, this hurts your air conditioning too. So like I said, anytime that air is moving through that, or your furnace is operating, I don't care if it's under heat, under air conditioning.
Just fan.
Right. That furnace filter is being used. So the style and everything else, that is really up to you. But I will say that the tighter it is, the smaller particles that it's going to collect, usually the quicker it's going to clog up. So that's a way to be able to think about that. As far as this part inside, I do want to talk about something else. So I'm going to sabotage this sucker. So I'm going to do something that's going to make this furnace not work, maybe. Come on. Don't talk to me anymore. I'm breaking the furnace.
Like a different one.
All right. You want to turn and make sure that's calling for heat, Mooney? All right. So now we're going to go through this same thing, and there's a reason I'm doing this. So there's our light. Yep, we're getting power to the motherboard. And yep, that's running. I hear that. Okay, that's good. Now the next step should be that little glow stick's going to start glowing, and the gas will turn on with the gas valve and ignite it and start heating up that heat exchanger.
That's not glowing.
But it's not glowing. So it's going to run for a little while. I'm not going to go through this whole rigmarole, but again, just watching it, you should know
It's flashing too.
how long. Yep, you should know how long it takes to do this. And if your furnace, like I said, they're so smart now, they'll tell you what's their problem. So if, let's say, you walk downstairs and you're going through these steps, am I getting power to it? Blah blah blah. Oh yeah, I got a light. And you look in there, and that light is normally a solid light. But you look down there, and it's blinking at you. And you go, well, what the heck is that? So you shut it down, and you start it back up, and it starts blinking at you again. And you're like, well, there's a reason it's blinking. It's telling you what's wrong. So, and this depends. So, and as I said, furnaces are all a little different. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to set this over here. So, and it depends. Like I said, usually it might be in the owner's manual, might be stuck on the back of this, but usually it's going to have an LED code, And what this does is it says exactly what's going on with your furnace. And most of the time, it's a series of blinks. It might be like, 2 short blinks and 3 long blinks, right? And it depends on the manufacturer. But if you have this, it will kind of tell you what's going on. Not so much that you can fix it. Sometimes you can. It might be saying, hey, your exhaust is blocked. And then you might go outside and go, oh, I stuck something in front of it. And then you pull it away and you start your furnace back up again. And it says, oh, good. Now I can breathe. I'm good. But sometimes, like I said, it will tell you what's going on, and sometimes it's fixable in your part. Sometimes what it is you say, all right, you call up the furnace person and you say, yep, I have a Brian, or I have a whatever, and it's giving me an error code saying that it's this or it's that. It's going to give them a little bit of a heads up. Instead of them coming and you're paying them to be able to basically look at the code and look at the booklet and be able to figure out what it is and then go get the part. They might have that already, and they might not want to know what your model number and stuff like that is. And again, back to having that information. And again, some people will write it right on their return duct, so they have that right there. Some people will even write down like the codes, and they'll write it down So they're not having to pull this door off and look at it and stuff. They'll just be like, this is this and this and this. So sometimes that helps. But yeah, like I said, that furnace will say usually what's going on. Now, here's the thing. So in this one here, right, I pulled this off. This is a pressure switch. That just got disconnected. And this is part of the reason I'm talking about you don't really want to get in there, because I've seen it where people get in and they're cleaning it or they're doing something and they do something as silly as pull this off accidentally or nick a rubber tube or something. And then that furnace runs through its check cycle and it's going, oh, something's not right. And again, you know, this is a little more advanced, but the heating person comes out and goes, oh, that's loose. So, you know, again, you know, like I said, if you're comfortable with it, you can look at it and kind of get a feel for what it should look like, that sort of thing. I'm not saying to get in there and be able to do a lot of that stuff, but, you know, just having that general understanding of how it should work. So on that note, I'm going to do this. That light comes on. It's solid now. So it's saying that it's not getting an error code yet. And it should run through that cycle again where this kicks on and then be able to kick that on. And we may have, it may keep reverting back down.
Yep.
There it goes. So we call it telling the thermostat that we want heat. Yep. There's that. And we'll go through and do all that stuff. Normally, you don't do this with this door open. I'm doing this just so you can kind of see what's going on in here, because I would say when that fan starts running, that's the last thing you want is have your fingers anywhere near it. So there's your cycle, that sort of thing. So like I said, with forced air furnaces,
Never do what he's doing.
never do this. Don't do this. And let's see, that should kick on. There you go. But like I said, just understanding that, you know, the normal clicks and noises that furnace is going to be making, should be making, helps you. So, and then there's that lower motor starts running, pulling good air and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, they usually have a troubleshooting guide somewhere in there, so that you can at least be able to go through and that furnace is telling you kind of what's up, what's going on. So there are other styles of furnaces out there. We have about 10 minutes left.
5 minutes.
They said your furnaces will look very different, you know, all different styles and everything else. Some of the people that are in our habitat program have very, very small furnaces like this. You know, he said they're all basically the same. You know, they all work basically the same. If you have an electric furnace, it's a totally different animal. Or if you have like a boiler or oil heat or something along that line, if you have something kind of out of the norm, that's where you want to make sure that, you know, if you call somebody and you talk to somebody, they know what you have. Because there are some people out there that will not touch certain types of furnaces. They may not have the tech for it or something along that line. So make sure you just have a basic understanding.
And if they come to your house, they charge you whether they
Right.
touch it or not. You
Right.
get a service call.
Right. Yeah, that's the last thing you want as far as them showing up.
Could
Saying,
snow block my exhaust?
It can, yeah. Yep. It can very easily block it. And sometimes, you know, I've seen it where ice builds up and it closes it up enough to where it's just not expelling enough of that nasty air. And yeah, it'll shut things down. So, and that usually is something that if you're having that issue, something else is usually going on. There's usually a reason. So, you know, and that's where having that, you know, trained, licensed person to be able to troubleshoot that stuff really makes a big difference. I do want to point at one other thing here real quick. I forgot to point at. Anytime you're burning natural gas, that sort of thing, you create a lot of water. All right. So you may have a tube coming out the side and it may run to a drain in the floor, and that's cool if that's the case. Or it may run to what's called a sump pump. There's a little pump on the side, and it may have a tube like this. And what it does is that water, that condensate water, is directed in here. There's a little float, and when it gets up to about there, it's going to kick a little motor on and pump that water and pump it. In this case, I think it's going to the mop sink or something over there. But I have seen it where sometimes these are wired in where if this isn't working, it's not going to let the furnace work. Or you walk down to your furnace and there's tons of water all over the place. Usually means that if you have one of these, that sump pump is fried out. And it's just not pumping anything. I do want to point out this one little thing though. Sometimes if you have that issue, let's say you got water coming out of here and you figure out, yep, it's coming out of here. And I said that motor sits in here. Sometimes a little tap on it will actually make it kick on. Sometimes somebody just came and unplugged the thing. And again, you look at your basics first. Sometimes for some oddball reason, you might not be getting power to your furnace and that. So we talk about that in electrical class. So, I mean, let's say, again, you've gone through and you've checked all the stuff and you're still not getting power to your furnace. You know your switch is on and everything else. Well, you go to your panel box, make sure the breaker didn't trip. With this, again, usually it's just plugged in. Sometimes for some oddball reason, you might not be getting power to that. Sometimes the motor just jams up. Sometimes this needs to be replaced. So like I said, water can occasionally, depending on how this is wired in, make it so it shuts that whole furnace right down. But yeah, that sump pump. I said sometimes they're mounted to the furnace. Sometimes they're sitting on the side of it just to get that condensate water out. So I could keep going, but I think I've run out of time.
Oh, wait, there's a question. How many degrees can I turn my furnace down if I'm going to be away from home? How many degrees can I turn my furnace down?
That's actually a good question. I think it boils down to the thermostat itself. Some thermostats won't let you go down like below 45. Some are like 50 or something. As long as it's low enough, you get into some of the real high efficiency ones that may not like being that low, but that is one of those things that you can talk to the heating person about. If your furnace is one of those real high efficiency ones that doesn't like to be below a certain temperature, but that is a good question. Most of the time it's kind of dictated by the thermostat. But occasionally you might have a furnace that doesn't necessarily want to be below a certain temperature.
What if I just want to save money and turn it down like while I'm sleeping? How many degrees does it have to go down to save money? What does that difference need to be?
Oh my gosh.
It seems like everybody has
I know.
opinion.
Everybody does. I mean, they say turning your thermostat down 1 degree saves a certain chunk. A lot of that boils down to how well insulated your house is, that sort of thing.
How comfortable you are with that
Right,
temperature.
how comfortable you are with that temperature.
If we keep ours cold. It's cold.
64.
It's cold.
That is one of those things that is hard to say. Now, and it depends on how much you're paying for your natural gas and all that sort of stuff. But generally, you're going to save a decent amount. And again, you said if you have that furnace checked and tuned up once a year, once every other year, it's going to make sure that, your furnace is using that natural gas that you're paying an arm and a leg for to its best advantage and creating the most heat that it can out of what it's given. So, but like I said, this is tied into a lot of other things. And again, you might be seeing that theme that a lot of things are tied together. And that's part of what we're trying to show in these classes is that this affects that, and that is part of this, and everything is. So, anyways, I'll leave it alone.
Oh, wait. Can you stack furnace filters to create the right thickness? If you
No.
need 4 inches, can you use 4
No.
1-inch filters?
I wouldn't do that. I would not do that.
We do sell furnace filters here at Community Homeworks at a very reasonable price. If we almost always have the 4 and the 5-inch deep ones here. If you need that size, give us a call. Zach will answer the phone and ask him what you need. Tell him what you need, and he'll double check that we have it and tell you how much they cost. But we're a whole big savings over the big box stores.
And yeah, a lot of times, like I said, I just bought, a basket of them or an amount of them, and I set them right here. And usually they're wrapped up, and it reminds me, hey, check your filter, and then they're right here, and I'm not having to go out and keep forgetting to get it. So if you're picking one up to replace, usually pick up another one that you can set right here. So next time when it comes time to change it, you have it, and you can be able to switch it right out.
My smart thermostat sends me an email saying it's time to change my filter.
Yep.
It thinks I should change it much more often than the technician that put my furnace in. So it's I try to find a happy medium.
Yeah. I said that clogged filter is usually the biggest culprit in furnaces. The other thing is, and I don't mean to kind of ramble on, but I will say this. If you have a furnace that is oversized, all right, what will happen is that your furnace, when your furnace is sized correctly for the house that you have, again, this is something that has to be figured out. But generally, that furnace is going to run for a while. Remember that other heat exchanger I was showing you in that other one? To get it up to that efficiency, that furnace needs to run. And sometimes that's counterintuitive to people. They're like, well, my furnace seems like it's always running. I'm spending a lot of money. Well, no, you might not be. I mean, that may just be the design of that furnace. The issue is that if you have a furnace that's oversized and it kicks on and it heats your house up to whatever you set the thermostat at, and it gets it there in 5 minutes, and then your furnace shuts off, and in another 5 minutes you lose all that heat because you don't have insulation or whatever, and your furnace kicks on again. That's what's called short cycling, and it actually wears that furnace out quicker. Parts and pieces in there start falling apart, and that's usually one of the indications that the furnace is just maybe too large. And this is something that you said a good heating tech should be able to size the furnace correctly for your house. So anyways, I'll stop.
Thank you, Lee. We always learn so much when you're here telling us ways to keep our house to its best condition. But those filters are the most important thing. I was at a meeting last night where the lady was having her furnace kept running, but the blower part kept running. And she got her book out and read it all, and it said, make sure your filter was clean. So she went down and changed her filter, and it didn't fix it. And she was feeling around for some switch that it said to look for. And she found a second filter, which just totally surprised her that there was the filter like Lee showed you tonight, but then there was another one halfway up her ductwork. Just the minute I changed that, my furnace worked just fine again. So, check around, read your book. Maybe you'll learn that you have 2 places filters are also. So, but don't forget, we do sell filters, and we'd love to sell you one. So I'm glad you watched tonight. If you have questions, again, you can send them to us. Someone will get back to you. It won't be me. This is my last class. I am retiring at the end of the year, and I will miss all of you.
Oh, Miss Jean.
Thank you, Lee.
We will miss you, Jean. You're such a sweet lady. Love your stores.
So hopefully I'll still be around and see you sometimes. Once we're back in person, I'm going to come in and be able to say goodbye to people. So thanks for joining us tonight. We will be on vacation next week, but watch for a notice of our first class in January of 2022.
Yay. And happy holidays.
Yes. Turn it around and say goodbye, Lori.
I'd have to get it real. You'd have to take it.
Hey, this is Lori, who's done all of our videoing of her husband's classes and has become a good friend. And so we'll miss having her around for a couple weeks while we're on vacation.
I prefer to be behind the scenes.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later. Bye.
I am Jason, and I am Gene's supervisor, and I just wanted to thank Gene for 3 years of great work at Community Homeworks. Thank you, Gene. We will miss you immensely. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a great place to work. I've learned so much. I've met so many wonderful people, and I will certainly miss the staff and all of our participants. Thanks again.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Oh, I didn't get it.